Hey everyone, Raptor Spank here, and today we have Metacheck June 22nd. This is the show where I talk about the meta, some decks I find interesting, and usually I'll go over an update on my deck from the previous week, but we won't be doing that today. But I guess we'll jump straight into that. We covered Lissandra Taliyah last week. Pretty solid deck, still seeing a decent bit of it now, but the thing is, I mentioned at the time, it's so coin flippy with some of its matchups right now that it's a decent deck, and I would expect its win rate to be a bit over 50%. But only Diamond 3 right now, have to hit Masters in a week. I can't afford to spend time on a deck like that, spending any more time playing games. I have to go for decks that are going to have a much more guaranteed win rate, or high win rate. So I have not played the deck since. I would love to play the deck again. It's actually a really fun deck, and if I can hit Masters before the last day of the season, then maybe I'll spend a little more time messing around with that deck for fun, but not what I'm playing right now. So, what are we playing right now? Started off Azir Draven, got me to Diamond, that was Azir Draven that got me there, and it's been floundering a little bit since, so I kind of dropped it after 6 games. It went 2-4, with the 1-2 record against Azir Irelia, a loss against Lissandra Taliyah, and then one more loss against some, I think it was Freljord Overwhelm, like the Sivir Renekton deck, which is not a matchup that it really should lose. So that was probably the last game I played on it. That was probably the last straw for Azir Draven. So I've been playing Azir Irelia, 10-4, 71% win rate, which is way better than I was getting on the deck last time I was playing it when I did the deck guide on it. And, yeah, it's busted. It's really busted. Funny enough, I've lost to Azir Darius twice. That's been the 2 times I've run into it. I've lost against it both times. They've had pretty nuts draws, but the deck really can race sometimes, which is weird. I think it's partially on the nerfs, with Blossoming Blade being a little more expensive and Inspiring Marshal coming down a turn later. That may be why this matchup's starting to swing that way, but that was pretty surprising. I've run into a variety of Shyvana dragons. Most of them have some number of Aurelian souls in it, but there was one I ran into that was just purely Zoe Shyvana, and we're 2-1 into that matchup, and we still barely lost the one we did, so that is a favorite matchup for us. And Lissandra Taliyah, we split 1-1. They ran nuts in the game we lost, and we ran really, really slow, which is kind of how I expect that matchup to go, but that's kind of a general thought on the meta. Seeing a lot of Lissandra Taliyah, seeing a lot of Azir Darius burns, seeing a lot of dragons, and of course, tons and tons of Azir Irelia. Weird enough, not seeing much Thresh Nasus. I'm not really sure why, although last time I played it, it did not perform particularly well, so maybe other people are finding the same experience, and that's why we're not seeing as much of it right now, but I'm seeing more of things like Azir Draven, Dragons, Azir Irelia, Lissandra Taliyah. Those are kind of the big decks in the meta right now, with Azir Darius being another kind of like right on the edge of being one of the main decks you'll see, but tons of Dragons, tons of Lissandra Taliyah. Azir Draven is ticking down a little bit, where I'm not seeing it quite as much, and maybe a similar thing as Thresh Nasus, as people are finding what I was finding with it, but I kind of have a feeling I'll play it a bit more before the end of the season, though, because it is such a consistent deck for just bringing you wins. So there's a good chance I'll end up back on Azir Draven at some point, but right now, anyways, I'm just grinding that Azir Irelia lifestyle because it just gives you a crazy good win rate. That's just kind of what it is. It can basically win any game because it has these crazy fast draws, so even if you hit a bad matchup, there's still a chance you're going to win, which is kind of the hallmark for decks I like to grind with, is when I feel like the game's not decided the second I see what my opponent's deck is. So Azir Irelia, really good for that. I've been playing a lot of it, been seeing a lot of it. Lissandra Taliyah is neat, but I am starting to see it trend down a little bit, and that probably is because Azir Irelia does seem to kind of slam that matchup. So that definitely would discourage me from playing Lissandra Taliyah, or is discouraging me from playing Lissandra Taliyah. But yeah, that's kind of a look at where we're at in the final weeks of this meta before we hit the new expansion. Not really too much that they've spoiled about the expansion yet. Lurk seems interesting, but also it's going to need a lot coming with it to really make it a good mechanic, I guess would be the way to put it, because This isn't Magic, this isn't Flesh and Blood. There's not a lot of ways to play with the top of your deck and set it up the way that you want it to be. So unless they're going to add something like Scry/Op to the game, Lurk just does not seem great. Unless you have like an all Lurk deck, like a 40 card Lurk deck, so you're always lurking. Maybe that would make it a little bit better. It's really hard to say. Be neat to see when the full spoiler comes out for that. But couple of decks to talk about today. First off, we are going to go a little bit more into Azir Irelia, specifically the version I'm playing right now, and this is the list I'm running with. I still love my one of Conspirator. It's kind of a good, aggressive, elusive unit, and it's a nice way to get a free pickup and put back into play trigger. Inspiring Marshal, you definitely don't want more than 2 at this point with how expensive it is, but Blossoming Blades has still performed really well for me, so running all 3 makes sense. I'm only running a single Nopify. Maybe that's a mistake. That's debatable. I also have the 2 Homecomings. Those have been incredible. And then the one of Retreat, Return, or whatever you want to consider it, that has been very good for me. So I don't want to go up any copies, but I definitely think the one of is really, really solid on that. So to get another Nopify in would be a bit difficult. So that's kind of what we're playing here. Name of the game's really simple. Everyone's seen this deck. It's just run your opponent down as fast as possible. Sometimes you're going to go weird routes with that. Like, you're not going to want to necessarily attack on turn 2 if they're going to play like a Mountain Goat, and you're going to have Sparring Student Emperor's Dais, because you don't necessarily want to trade with a Sparring Student, although in some matchups you are willing to offer that trade. But sometimes Dais is the best so that you're getting that engine started very early, but other times you're going to be like, okay, but I have double Dunekeeper in hand and a Sparring Student on the board. I'm just going to go double Dunekeeper. And I've done that too against specifically like Ezreal Draven. I like that play against, because if you just put down the Emperor's Dais, they can always Mystic Shot your Sparring Student, and now you don't get the attacks, you don't get the Sand Soldier. So I love the whole crazy aggro starts you can have with this, where it's not always best to be building towards a better late turn. Sometimes it's just slam them right now. And that'll include, like, sometimes you just go Ribbon Dancer over Emperor's Dais too, if you think you can get away with a huge swing. But yeah, the deck is just really fun. There's a lot of different aggressive ways to go with it, so constantly evaluating your plan and what the best way forward is pretty key with the deck. But yeah, it's super overpowered. Hopefully gets nerfed in the next patch, but I'll believe it when I see it. So right now, grinding the deck, doing what I can to get to Masters off of it. It's a really, really good deck. I highly recommend trying it if you're just looking for something to get a ton of games in and just slowly climb the ladder. This is going to be one of your best choices. But up from there, let's talk about one of the other meta decks that I haven't really covered this season, which is Dragons. It never quite made it over the curve for me to start running it myself. There was a time when people seemed to think it was better than Azir Irelia, so I was considering running it then, but then it started getting slammed in the matchup, so I kind of never went back to it. But I've played variants of this deck over the past year, because it's been around a long time, actually. There's been like the whole Garen Leona mid-range version at one point, but there's just been tons of Targon Demacia mid-range decks, because they're both the 2 best mid-range regions in the game, so this deck's kind of come a long way. This is the closest we've probably had to actually a good competitive Dragons deck, since we do have like the Dragon Chows, the Dragon Guards, we have the Screeching Dragons, the Eclipse Dragons, the Aurelian Soul, the Shyvana. You level up Shyvana fairly often too, so this is probably the closest we've come, but obviously we still have lots of just good value cards like Radiant Guardian, Fang, Sunforger. Sunforger is one of the hardest cards to play around for the Azir Irelia matchup, actually. Kind of your best bet is just to pick up your own unit then, to block and to pick it up, but if you bounce their Sunforger, they're just going to play it next turn and gain that lifesteal, so it's a really good card for kind of undoing some of the crazier things. And then Hush is really good too, because you can always Hush an Azir or something like that before they get a chance to attack, so that they don't get all those extra triggers, although you're kind of just still bleeding out at that point. So really where Hush does some crazy things is like Thresh Nasus. And maybe because I'm seeing so much Shyvana Dragons right now, that's why we're not seeing as much Nasus Thresh, because Hush is so good at dealing with that. And also there was that Mono Fiora deck that was bouncing around for a while, and Hush is obviously very, very good in that deck too. So that's why I'm running the 3 of for that. And then Concerted Strike's really, really good. Sharp Sight's really good. It's just a great mid-range deck that can gain a bunch of life to deal with some of the more aggressive strategies while having one of the best late games out there. Debatable whether it is or is not better than, say, like Deep, but yeah, it's a solid deck. This is one of the lists that looks the most interesting to me, although I probably would try to jam a Star Shaping or 2 in there before I took this onto the ladder myself. But it's a neat version of the deck. I think it's fairly solid, and if you are looking for something cool and Timmy with big dragons and all that, this is a reasonable pick. Last I seen, I thought this was pulling an under 50% win rate, but it's hard to say. It's got some really good matchups, but it is weak to Azir Irelia, and there's a ton of Azir Irelia out there, so that is somewhat concerning. But it is a fun deck if you're looking for something very different from the other decks that have been plaguing this season. So it's mid-range, definitely true, just straight mid-range. So fun little deck if you're looking for that kind of strategy. And if you are interested in either one of those decks, there is a deck link in the description below. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe for more Legends of Runeterra content.